So I wanted to make a video that was similar to a video that Redeem Zoomer made, and the topic was on a pyramid of authority for Reformed Christians. And I think there were some really good things in that video, but I think what could be better is a pyramid of authority that can actually be for uh, more Catholic Christians in the little c sense. So I'm going to go through. It's a very similar list to what Redeem Zoomer has, but I think it has a more broad, um, small c Catholic appeal. And so the first uh, part of the pyramid is on God, and so we have God, the Trinity, is our first and infallible and top authority. And, you know, it might seem obvious, but where do we get God as our authority? Well, it says the scriptures, which reveal to us this. Well, first of all, we have natural revelation, which is when we are born, everybody knows that we are accountable to God. Everybody in their heart can see that God has created the universe and that we owe worship to Him, which is why all people want to worship something. We can see that He created things, we know right and wrong, and we know that we must do good, and evil is bad. Everybody knows this. Um, but the Bible reveals who this God is, that God is Trinity. It says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended not. And this word became flesh and dwelt among us. What does that mean? Well, the word, the authority of God, came and dwelt with man and showed us how to interpret natural revelation and gave us and showed us what the fullness of God's revelation is in the Old Testament or the Jewish books and the New Testament, which Christ's apostles wrote. Um, and so those come to our secondary authority, which is the Bible, which is the revealed will of God. This is so if there's two sources of authority in the world, or of revelation in the world. There's natural revelation and scriptural revelation. Both are authoritative, but the Bible, as God's infallible word, um, is our only infallible authority when it comes to matters of salvation. And so everything that is in the Bible, all other beliefs must conform to it in matters of salvation. And so, what we as Catholic Christians small c Catholic Christians believe in a 66 book Bible, which is what the whole church has agreed upon as the scriptures, and the Apocrypha, which is less authoritative than the 66 books, but still authoritative in as much as not establishing doctrine, but supporting doctrine. But then what Bible should we use? Well, according to the Anglican tradition, classic sources for the explication and elucidation of scriptural doctrine include the following: the King James Bible, the translation of the Bible into English begun in the 16th century by William Tyndale, achieved its classic form in 1611 translation under King James I, and remains the basis for many modern versions, such as the Revised Standard Version and the English Standard Version. In keeping with the principles of the English Reformation that promote worship in language that the people understand, the Bible has been since translated into many languages. Anglican Christianity is now spread to encompass people of many races and languages all over the world. So what does it mean? Well, in general, English Christians um, use the King James Bible and the Textus Receptus textual base and her descendants as the authoritative um, manuscript tradition for doctrine. Well, why is this? Well, one, it's the received text. That's what Textus Receptus means. And it means it's just the traditional texts that have been passed down. So, for example, in more critical editions, they will get rid of the last chapter of Mark or the extended chapter of Mark, um, and we will receive it. Why? Well, this is the authoritative edition that has been passed down to us. Um, And so the 66 books plus the Apocrypha is authoritative for Anglican Christians. Next, we have the formularies and the tradition. Or sorry, we have the councils and the creeds, the 7 ecumenical councils and the 3 creeds. These are not infallible, but are 100% true because they were guided by the Holy Spirit and produced by the universal church. And so, according to the fundamental declarations, and this is specifically for the Anglican Church in North America and the Reformed Episcopal Church, the fundamental declarations of the province says, concerning the 7 councils of the undivided church, we affirm the teaching of the first 4 councils and the Christological clarifications of the 5th, 6th, and 7th councils, insofar as they are agreeable to the scriptures. And so they also say, we confess as proved by most certain warrants of Holy Scripture the historic faith of the undivided church, as declared in the 3 Catholic creeds, the Apostles, the Nicene, and the Athanasian. So they not only affirm the Apostles, Nicene, and Athanasian Creed, but they also affirm the councils. And why is this? Well, we take the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Constantinople, where the Nicene Creed was formulated. There are not only the creeds, but also the canons of these councils, and these canons are also binding. What a lot of more evangelical or Reformed or Lutheran and sometimes Anglican Christians will do is they will take the creed, but not the council. This is like taking the preamble of the Constitution of the United States and throwing away the rest of the Constitution. No, the whole document is binding, not just the creed. And we must remember there's historical and literary context to the canons, so some parts may be only applicable to their time, but the both the council itself and the creed itself are binding on Christians to believe. And the Apostles' Creed and the Athanasian Creed are are binding in that they have been received by our tradition and are in agreement with the Nicene Creed. Next, now is the formularies and the tradition. This includes things such as the 39 Articles, the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, the Catechism, both the original Catechism and the Catechism received by our Anglican Church in North America and the Reformed Episcopal Church, the ordinal, the homilies again in their cultural context, and in fact, the books of homilies were always intended to be rewritten. And when they got to America, when the Episcopal Church was founded in America, they were just never rewritten. But they have always been seen as the homilies are to be binding for their time and in their context, and in as much as they are agreeable to the 39 Articles and the tradition of the Church, they are binding on Anglican Christians. The Jerusalem Declaration, the Fundamental Declaration of the Province, and the Church Fathers as in receiving the tradition, and this would be the first 500 to 1,000 years of the universal church. And so these formularies are how a particular church has received the Catholic faith. We it is the particular explanation of the Catholic faith that the Anglican Church has received is summed up in chiefly in the 39 Articles of Religion of 1571. And how can we determine what the true tradition is of the church? Well, we get this from Saint Vincent of Lérins, who says, I have often then inquired earnestly and attentively of very many men eminent for sanctity and learning, how and by what sure and, so to speak, universal rule I may be able to distinguish the truth of Catholic faith from the falsehood of heretical pravity. And I have always, and in almost every instance, received an answer to this effect, that whether I or anyone else should wish to detect the frauds and avoid the snares of heretics as they arise, and to continue sound and complete in the Catholic faith, we must, the Lord helping, fortify our own belief in 2 ways. First, by the authority of the divine law, and then by the tradition of the Catholic Church. So, what St. Vincent of Lérins here describes is the original form of sola scriptura, or what has been commonly in modern times called prima scriptura, which is that the scriptures are are only infallible authority by which we test the tradition of the church. And what the 39 articles are the tradition of the church summarized against the false and heretical um, innovations of both the Puritans and the Romanists. And so next we have, after the formularies and the tradition of the church, pastors, and this being bishops, priests, and deacons, which is the most unique element of this out of this list, in that um, no other churches except the Catholic churches have bishops. You may have elders and deacons in the Presbyterian Church, but there is no such thing as a direct authority in those churches. In the Episcopal model, there is the lay people have a direct submission that is required to their priest, inasmuch as they are in submission to the scriptures. And so they not only have a moral authority, but also a doctrinal authority. So, for example, if a bishop allows for, let's say, infant communion, and we can find infant communion in the tradition of the church, especially the early tradition of the church, and we can find that in the scriptures, the children were allowed to partake in the Passover, and there is not a direct um, ban on children eating the Eucharist, and there is no. Oh, and Jesus, he calls for the little children to come to him. If a bishop uh, decides that this is going to be what his diocese is going to practice, since it is an adiaphora position, um, then you must submit to that authority. And so there is a moral and doctrinal authority in the lives of the lay people. And so then, okay, there's a doctrinal example. What about a moral example? If you are going to get married, then you have to go through your priest. Um, and he will tell you whether or not this is a good idea or a bad idea, whether you are acting in as a man in a godly way towards and with making godly decisions and who you pick to be your wife, or if you're not. And he will say, no, you shouldn't marry that person, or yes, you should. I think this is a good idea. And he has an actual moral authority that you should follow. And the next is lay people. So, oh, and this was pastors. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. You should submit to the presbyters or priests, elders of the church, and the bishops who are above them, and also the deacons who are servants of God. And then finally, we have the lay people who Christ says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts the Lord. That we have a brotherly or sisterly authority over each other, not a fatherly or kingly authority, and that we should admonish one another when um, and lift each other up when we do right, and tell each other when we're not doing right. And if we have issues with a brother, we should tell it to our priest, tell it to the church. But if you neglect to hear the church, let him be unto us as a heathen man and a publican. Matthew 18:17. And so that is the pyramid of authority for Anglican Christians. I hope that was enjoyable to watch, and I um, hope that you can see that this model is not only applicable to the way Anglican Christians work, but it can also be applicable to the way Lutherans work, especially Episcopal Lutherans. They would just replace their formularies with the Book of Concord, Roman Catholics, and also Eastern Orthodox, except they may have more ecumenical councils or they may have less ecumenical councils, depending. So that's the way uh, Anglicans submit to the authority of God through the church.